Have you ever stopped to think about how the Ten Commandments can transform your life? Much more than simple rules, they are eternal principles that shape morality and spirituality, guiding us to a life of integrity, love, and respect. In this video, we will explore each of the commandments, discovering their deep meaning and how to apply them in our daily lives to live according to God's will. Get ready for a revealing journey that can change your perspective on faith and life. The origin of the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are a series of fundamental precepts given by God to Moses, which served as the basis of the moral law for the people of Israel. The story begins with the liberation of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, an event known as the Exodus. After crossing the Red Sea, the Israelites traveled through the desert until they arrived at Mount Sinai. It was there that Moses climbed the mountain and amid thunder, lightning, and a thick cloud, received from God the stone tablets with the Ten Commandments. These commandments were a significant milestone in the history of the Jewish people, establishing a clear set of norms that regulated not only religious behavior, but also social and moral interactions. Unlike the laws of neighboring civilizations, the Ten Commandments were not restricted to a juridical or civil code, but were profoundly spiritual and ethical, emphasizing the sanctity of life, the importance of truth, respect for property, and integrity in human relationships. Over the centuries, the Ten Commandments have transcended Jewish culture and become a moral foundation for Christianity and Islam, influencing even the legal systems of various Western societies. The impact of these commandments on the daily and spiritual lives of millions of people around the world is immeasurable, reflecting their ongoing relevance and importance. First Commandment: You shall have no other gods before me. The first commandment is the cornerstone of monotheistic faith, emphasizing the exclusivity of God in the hearts and lives of the faithful. You shall have no other gods before me is a clear declaration that Yahweh, the God of Israel, is the only one worthy of worship and reverence. This commandment was revolutionary in a historical context where polytheism was the norm, with numerous deities worshipped in the cultures surrounding Israel. The demand for absolute loyalty to a single God not only solidified the religious identity of the Israelites, but also deeply shaped their cultural and spiritual practices. This commandment combats the temptation of religious syncretism, where elements of different religions might be mixed, diluting the purity of faith. Exclusive devotion to God requires total commitment, rejecting any form of idolatry or worship of false entity. In daily practice, the first commandment guides the faithful to place God above all things, whether in their decisions, values, priorities, or aspirations. This implies recognizing God's sovereignty in all areas of life, from personal morality to community and social issues. It demands an intimate and personal relationship with God, where trust and obedience are expressions of the love and reverence owed to Him. This commandment is often reflected in the words of Jesus in the New Testament, when He reaffirms the importance of loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind. It is a call for sincere and integral devotion that rejects superficiality and embraces a deeply lived faith. Throughout history, many martyrs and saints have demonstrated this unwavering loyalty, choosing fidelity to God above their own lives, exemplifying the depth and transformative power of the first commandment. Second commandment: You shall not make for yourself a carved image. The second commandment prohibits the creation and worship of idols, establishing that God should not be represented by any image or material figure. You shall not make for yourself a carved image reinforces the transcendent and incomparable nature of God, who cannot be limited or captured by any physical or artistic form. This commandment is deeply rooted in the belief that God is spirit, and therefore infinitely greater than anything the human mind can conceive or create. In the historical context, this was a powerful statement against the common practices of neighboring nations, which worshipped a multitude of gods represented by idols and carved figures. Cultures such as the Egyptian, Canaanite and Babylonian were rich in religious iconography, with gods depicted by statues, paintings, and other artifacts. The prohibition of idols aimed to protect the Israelites from the influence of these pagan practices and to preserve the purity of their worship. Worshipping a carved image or any physical representation of God reduces the divinity to something created, contrary to the ineffable and eternal essence of the Creator. This commandment also extends to excessive reverence for sacred objects or relics, reminding the faithful that true worship should be directed to God and not to objects symbolizing or representing faith. Besides preventing idolatry, the second commandment promotes a higher and more spiritualized vision of the relationship with God. Instead of relying on tangible images, the faithful are called to seek a direct and personal connection with the divine through prayer, meditation, and observance of the commandments. The emphasis is on faith and spiritual experience, which transcend the limitations of the material world. Historically, this commandment had significant implications in Jewish and later Christian art and culture. The Jewish tradition avoided representations of God in their synagogues and scriptures, focusing on abstract symbols and Hebrew letters to express the sacred. In Christianity, while some traditions developed rich iconographies, others, such as Protestantism, maintained a stricter stance against images, reflecting the influence of the second commandment. This commandment continues to resonate in contemporary spiritual life, reminding the faithful of the importance of pure and genuine worship that seeks God in spirit and truth, without intermediaries or material representation. Third commandment: you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. The third commandment, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, emphasizes the respect and reverence that should be shown to God's name. This commandment goes beyond the simple prohibition of using God's name carelessly or irreverently. It underscores the holiness and weight that God's name carries. In the biblical context, the name of God is a reflection of His identity, character, and presence. The name of God, Yahweh, was considered so sacred that the Jews avoided pronouncing it, substituting it with titles like Adonai, Lord. During scripture reading, using God's name in a frivolous or disrespectful manner is seen as a violation of divine holiness and a reflection of a lack of reverence for God. This commandment also warns against using God's name for false oaths or empty promises. In ancient times, swearing by God's name was a way to ensure the truthfulness of a statement. However, using God's name to justify lies, deceit, or any form of wrongdoing is a grave transgression, as it manipulates God's holiness for personal or dishonest purposes. Furthermore, the third commandment calls us to reflect on how we represent God through our words and actions. Invoking God's name to justify immoral or unjust behavior, or to condemn others hypocritically, is a form of taking His name in vain. This means the commandment also encompasses personal integrity and the coherence between what we profess to believe and how we live our lives. In the New Testament, Jesus reinforces the importance of honoring God in all our words and actions. He teaches that we should let our yes be yes and our no be no, discouraging unnecessary oaths and promoting a life of honesty and sincerity. Matthew 5:37. This commandment remains relevant today, reminding us to treat God's name with the utmost respect. It invites us to cultivate an attitude of reverence and awe for the Lord, recognizing the holiness of His name in our prayers, conversations, and daily decision. Honoring God's name is an expression of our devotion and love for Him, reflecting our desire to live according to His commandments and to glorify Him in all that we do. Fourth commandment: remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, emphasizes the importance of weekly rest and worship as an integral part of spiritual life. This commandment has deep roots in the creation story, where God, after 6 days of work, rested on the seventh day and blessed it, making it holy. Genesis 2:2-3. This day of rest, known as the Sabbath, is a time dedicated to spiritual renewal and strengthening the relationship with God. In the context of ancient Israel, the Sabbath was a day of complete cessation of labor, a moment to focus on God, family, and community. It was a sacred time that provided a necessary break from the daily routine, allowing individuals to recover their physical, mental, and spiritual energy. Sanctifying the Sabbath also involved participating in worship services and religious gatherings where God's Word was taught and shared. This special day served as a constant reminder of the covenant between God and His people, reaffirming dependence and trust in God as the provider of all things. Beyond the religious aspect, the Sabbath promoted social justice and equality. Everyone, including servants and animals, had the right to rest, reflecting God's compassion and justice. It was a way to remind the Israelites that just as God granted them rest and liberation from Egypt, they too should provide rest and freedom to all under their care. With the advent of Christianity, the observance of the Sabbath was reinterpreted. Early Christians began to celebrate Sunday, the day of Jesus' resurrection, as the new day of worship and rest. However, the underlying principle of the fourth commandment remains: the importance of setting aside regular time for worship, rest, and spiritual reflection. In modern times, the practice of sanctifying a specific day may vary, but the concept of finding time to disconnect from work and daily worries to focus on God and family remains relevant. It is a reminder that amid the hustle and bustle of contemporary life, we need moments of pause to reconnect with what is essential. Honoring the Sabbath helps us maintain a healthy balance between work and rest, body and spirit. It reminds us that we are not just workers, but also spiritual beings who need time to worship, reflect, and renew. This commandment invites us to create a rhythm of life that values both productivity and pause, reflecting God's wisdom and care in our daily lives. Fifth commandment, honor your father and mother. The fifth commandment, honor your father and mother, is fundamental to the structure and harmony of family relationships. It establishes the importance of respect, obedience, and reverence within the family unit, being one of the first commandments to focus directly on human and social interactions. In the historical context, honoring parents meant more than simple obedience. It included care, financial support, and emotional assistance, especially in old age. This commandment recognizes the wisdom and experience of parents, encouraging children to value and learn from this wealth of knowledge. In ancient Israel, the family was the central unit of society, and family stability was essential for communal well-being. Honoring parents is also an expression of gratitude. Parents are seen as co-creators with God, responsible for the life and upbringing of their children. Respecting parents is therefore an extension of respecting God, who gave us life through them. This commandment has a special promise attached to it, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Exodus 20:12. This suggests that a life marked by respect and honor for parents tends to be blessed with longevity and prosperity. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul reaffirms the importance of this commandment, highlighting its ongoing relevance. Ephesians 6:1-3. He also exhorts parents not to provoke their children to anger, but to bring them up with love and discipline in the Lord's way, indicating that respect and honor should be mutual. Honoring parents implies recognizing them as figures of authority and guidance, but also treating them with affection and dignity. In many contemporary cultures, this principle is evident in practices such as caring for elderly parents, maintaining strong family ties, and respecting family traditions. Today, this commandment may face challenges due to the complexities of modern family relationships. Divorces, blended families, and geographical distances can make the literal application of the commandment difficult. However, the underlying principle of respect, love, and care remains applicable. Honoring parents today can mean maintaining regular contact, providing emotional and financial support when necessary, and respecting their role in shaping our identity and value. Moreover, this commandment teaches us the importance of building healthy and respectful family relationships, which are the foundation for a just and compassionate society. It reminds us that respect and honor begin at home and extend to all our social interaction. Sixth commandment, you shall not kill. The sixth commandment, you shall not kill, protects the sanctity of human life, affirming that life is a sacred gift from God that must be respected and preserved. This commandment is one of the most fundamental and universal, reflecting a moral truth recognized by nearly all cultures and societies throughout history. In the biblical context, the commandment, you shall not kill, is directly related to the concept that human beings are created in the image and likeness of God. Genesis 1:27. Therefore, taking a human life is seen as an attack not only on the person, but also on the Creator himself. This commandment establishes a clear principle that human life must be protected from conception to natural death. In ancient Israel, the commandment, you shall not kill, was part of a broader moral code that included provisions for cases of homicide, accidents, and wars. There were distinctions between premeditated murder, manslaughter, and acts of war, reflecting a complex understanding of justice and the protection of life. However, the essence of the commandment remains. Human life is inviolable. In the New Testament, Jesus deepens the interpretation of this commandment by teaching that the root of violence lies in feelings of anger and hatred. In the Sermon on the Mount, he says, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment.' But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment." Matthew 5:20-22. This expansion includes not only the physical act of killing, but also the attitude of the heart, calling followers to cultivate peace, forgiveness, and reconciliation. In the Christian tradition, this commandment has been the basis for the doctrine of the inviolability of human life, influencing positions against abortion, euthanasia, suicide, and the death penalty. It also underscores the importance of resolving conflicts peacefully and justly, promoting the dignity and value of every person. In a contemporary context, you shall not kill can be understood in a broader sense, including the prevention of actions and policies that devalue human life. This can include efforts to combat poverty, hunger, domestic violence, and other forms of social injustice that contribute to the loss of lives. Moreover, this commandment calls us to be advocates for life in all its forms, promoting a culture of peace and mutual respect. It challenges us to see each person as a reflection of the image of God, worthy of love, respect, and protection. The application of this commandment today also involves complex ethical issues related to biotechnology, the right to life, and human dignity. In all these areas, the central principle remains: human life is sacred and must be treated with the highest respect and care. Seventh commandment, you shall not commit adultery. The seventh commandment, you shall not commit adultery, underscores the importance of fidelity and purity in marital relationships. This commandment protects the sanctity of marriage, which is seen as a sacred union established by God. Adultery, or having sexual relations outside of marriage, not only violates this union, but also causes profound harm to families and society. In the biblical context, marriage is more than a social contract. It is a divine covenant that reflects God's faithfulness to His people. When two individuals marry, they commit to a life of love, respect, and exclusivity. Therefore, adultery is a betrayal of this covenant and a breach of trust that can have devastating consequences. In ancient Israel, infidelity was severely condemned and, in many cases, punished by death, underscoring the seriousness of this transgression. The commandment, "You shall not commit adultery," also has broader implications for moral and ethical purity. Marital fidelity is seen as a reflection of faithfulness to God. Thus, sexual integrity is an integral part of personal and communal holiness. This commandment encourages the faithful to live lives marked by honesty, loyalty, and respect for their commitments. In the New Testament, Jesus expands the interpretation of this commandment by addressing not only the physical act of adultery, but also the thoughts and desires behind it. In Matthew 5:27-28, he says, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." This deeper approach calls followers to cultivate purity of heart and mind, avoiding not only the act, but also the thoughts and fantasies that lead to sin. Additionally, the Apostle Paul reinforces the importance of marital fidelity, highlighting that the body is a temple of the Holy Spirit and should be kept pure, 1 Corinthians 6:18-20. Infidelity not only harms the spouse, but also dishonors God, who dwells in each believer. Today, the commandment, "You shall not commit adultery," remains relevant in a society where sexual temptation and permissiveness are often promoted. Marital fidelity is essential for the emotional stability and health of families, and this commandment calls us to honor our commitments and live with integrity. The modern application of this commandment also includes combating pornography, which can be seen as a form of infidelity by fostering desires and fantasies that corrupt the purity of heart and mind. It challenges us to cultivate relationships based on genuine love, respect, and commitment. The seventh commandment reminds us that fidelity in marriage is an expression of our faithfulness to God. It calls us to live lives of holiness and integrity, reflecting the love and loyalty that God shows us. By obeying this commandment, we build strong and healthy families, which are the foundation of a just and loving society. Eighth commandment, "You shall not steal." The eighth commandment, "You shall not steal," is a fundamental principle that protects property and individual rights, promoting justice and integrity in human relationships. This commandment goes beyond the simple act of stealing. It encompasses any form of dishonesty or unjust taking of something that belongs to another person. In the biblical context, the commandment, "You shall not steal," is deeply rooted in the concept of justice and mutual respect. The Israelite society was based on strong communal and familial bonds, where trust and cooperation were essential. Stealing not only harmed the victim directly, but also undermined social cohesion and trust within the community. This commandment also reflects the understanding that God is the provider of all things. Everything we possess is ultimately a gift from God, and we must use it responsibly and with respect for others. Taking what does not belong to us is a form of disrespect to both our neighbor and the Creator. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul reinforces the value of honest work and generous sharing. In Ephesians 4:28 he says, "Anyone who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with their own hands, that they may have something to share with those in need." This verse highlights the transformation that should occur in the lives of believers, moving from dishonest actions to a life of honesty, diligent work, and generosity. The modern application of the commandment, "You shall not steal," is broad and encompasses various forms of dishonesty. This includes not only physical theft, but also fraud, corruption, plagiarism, and other practices that involve the wrongful appropriation of resources, information, or goods. In an increasingly complex and interconnected society, respect for others' property and integrity in transactions are more important than ever. Moreover, this commandment challenges us to consider issues of economic and social justice. It calls us to fight against systems and practices that exploit or unjustly deprive others of their possessions and rights. The pursuit of a just society includes ensuring that everyone has access to the resources needed to live with dignity and security. On a personal level, "You shall not steal" encourages us to cultivate honesty and integrity in all our actions. This means being truthful in our interactions, fulfilling our promises, and respecting the rights and property of others. By obeying this commandment, we contribute to a society where trust and justice prevail. In summary, the eighth commandment calls us to live lives marked by honesty, respect, and justice. It reminds us that all our possessions are gifts from God and should be used responsibly and generously. By honoring this commandment, we promote a world where the rights and dignity of every person are respected and protected. Ninth commandment: you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. The ninth commandment, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor," underscores the importance of truth and integrity in human interaction. This commandment extends beyond prohibiting lies in a courtroom. It encompasses all forms of dishonesty and falsehood that can harm individuals and the community at large. In the biblical context, false testimony was especially serious because the legal system heavily relied on the testimony of individuals to determine justice. False accusations or distortions of the truth could lead to the unjust punishment of the innocent and the corruption of the legal system. Therefore, truthfulness and integrity in testimony were crucial for maintaining justice and social order. This commandment also reflects the character of God, who is the embodiment of truth. God is described in the Scriptures as the truth and cannot lie. Titus 1:2. Thus, being honest and truthful is a way of reflecting the divine character and living according to God's value. In the New Testament, Jesus emphasizes the importance of truth and honesty in all areas of life. He teaches that our word should be reliable, stating, "But let your yes be yes and your no, no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one." Matthew 5:37. This emphasis on the simplicity and sincerity of our words reflects the call to live a life of integrity and transparency. Additionally, the Apostle Paul exhorts Christians to speak the truth to one another, highlighting the importance of relationships based on honesty and trust. Ephesians 4:25. Lying and deceit are seen as characteristics of the old nature, which must be abandoned in favor of a new life in Christ, marked by truth and righteousness. In contemporary practice, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor" applies to various situations, from avoiding gossip and slander to honesty in public and private declaration. It calls us to be people of our word, whose statements are trustworthy and whose intentions are pure. This commandment also has significant implications for social justice. False testimonies can perpetuate injustices, discriminations, and oppressions. Therefore, there is a moral responsibility to be truthful and just, especially in contexts where our words have a direct impact on the lives of others. In the digital age, where information can be easily manipulated and disseminated, the ninth commandment reminds us of the responsibility to verify the truth before sharing information. It calls us to combat fake news and misinformation, promoting truth and integrity in all forms of communication. In summary, the ninth commandment invites us to live honestly and with integrity, reflecting God's truth in our words and actions. It reminds us of the importance of building a society based on trust and justice, where truth is valued and dishonesty is rejected. By honoring this commandment, we contribute to a world where the dignity and rights of each person are respected and protected. 10th commandment, "You shall not covet." The 10th commandment, "You shall not covet," addresses the inner desire to possess what belongs to another person. Unlike the other commandments that deal with external actions, this one focuses on the attitude of the heart and mind, emphasizing that thoughts and desires also hold moral significance. "You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's." Exodus 20:17. In the biblical context, covetousness is seen as the root of many other sins. The intense and insatiable desire to possess something that belongs to another can lead to acts of theft, adultery, fraud, and even murder. Therefore, this commandment goes beyond the prohibition of unjust actions. Focusing on internal transformation and the cultivation of a pure and content heart. Covetousness reflects dissatisfaction with what God has given us, challenging His providence and wisdom. Instead of trusting that God will provide for all our needs, covetousness fuels a constant desire for more, creating a cycle of dissatisfaction and despair. This commandment calls us to recognize and resist these desires, seeking contentment and gratitude in our lives and the blessings we have received. In the New Testament, Jesus reinforces the importance of controlling internal desires. In Luke 12:15, He warns, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." Jesus teaches that the true value of life does not lie in material possessions, but in our relationship with God and others. The Apostle Paul also speaks about covetousness in several of his letters. In Colossians 3:5, he lists covetousness as a form of idolatry because it places material desires above God. Paul advises Christians to seek the things above, where Christ is, rather than being consumed by earthly desires. In a contemporary context, "You shall not covet" is a commandment against the consumerist mentality and constant comparison with others. Advertising and social media often encourage covetousness, creating a culture of competition and dissatisfaction. This commandment challenges us to resist these cultural pressures, focusing on living a life of simplicity, gratitude, and generosity. Additionally, this commandment calls us to celebrate the achievements and possessions of others without envy. It promotes an attitude of contentment and appreciation for the blessings we have, recognizing that each person receives different gifts and opportunities according to God's will. In summary, the 10th commandment, "You shall not covet," invites us to cultivate a heart and mind free from insatiable and destructive desires. It challenges us to find contentment in our relationship with God, trust in His provision, and celebrate the blessings of others. By obeying this commandment, we promote a life of peace, gratitude, and harmony, reflecting God's sufficiency and goodness in all areas of our life. The 10 Commandments are more than ancient instructions. They are timeless guides that teach us to live justly, lovingly, and with integrity. By understanding and applying each of them in our lives, we strengthen our relationship with God and with our neighbors, creating a more harmonious and compassionate society. May these commandments not just be words etched in stone, but living principles in our heart. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of spiritual learning and strengthen your commitment to a life of faith and purpose. See you in the next video.